December wind didn't ask permission. It tore through Henderson Park like a blade pulled straight from the Arctic, cutting through coats, through scarves, through skin, through bone. The kind of cold that doesn't just chill you, it warns you. It tells you that tonight, nature is not on your side. The streetlights above flickered weakly against the dark, casting long, pale shadows across empty benches dusted with snow. Most people had gone home hours ago. Smart people, warm people, people who had somewhere to go. Master Chief Ava Sterling was not supposed to be in that park. She had taken the long way home, the way she always took when the silence of her apartment felt heavier than the weight of every medal pinned to her chest. 18 years in the United States Navy SEALs had given her an instinct for movement, for purpose, for forward motion. Standing still was when the memories came, so she walked. Valor moved beside her, his gray-flecked muzzle low, his breath rising in small white clouds against the frozen air. He was 9 years old now, old for a military working dog, and though his pace had slowed, his instincts had not dulled by a single degree. It was Valor who stopped first. His ears lifted, his body went rigid, and from deep inside his chest came a sound that Ava had learned to trust more than any radar system, any satellite intelligence, any briefing room map. A low, urgent growl that meant one thing and one thing only. Something is wrong. Right now, right here. Ava's hand went to his back. Her eyes swept the park, and then she heard it. A child's voice, barely above a whisper. "Ma'am, please." She turned. On a bench, half hidden beneath a dead oak tree, sat a little boy. He couldn't have been more than 7 years old. He was wearing a thin jacket, the kind meant for autumn, not December. His sneakers were soaked through. His lips were trembling so violently she could see it from 10 feet away. But it wasn't the boy that made Ava's blood run cold. It was what he was holding. Cradled against his small chest, wrapped in what appeared to be his own removed sweater, was a baby girl, tiny, still. Her lips were not pink the way a baby's lips should be. They were blue, a pale, terrifying shade of blue that Ava had seen before, not in a park, not in peacetime, but in places she could never speak about, in moments she could never forget.
"She won't wake up," the boy whispered. His eyes were enormous, filled with a fear no 7-year-old should ever know. "I tried to keep her warm. I gave her my shirt, but she won't wake up." Valor made a sound, not a growl this time, something softer, something almost human. He stepped forward slowly, carefully, the way he had been trained to approach the wounded, and he pressed his warm body gently against the boy's leg. Ava was already moving. She did not panic. Panic was a luxury she had never been able to afford. In 18 years of combat operations, of missions that went wrong in ways that defied imagination, she had learned that panic kills, calm saves. So she went calm, the deep, focused, razor-sharp calm of a warrior who has looked death in the face and refused to blink. She stripped off her heavy Navy-issue coat in one motion and wrapped it around both children like a fortress wall. Then she lifted the baby, Sarah, she would learn her name later, and pressed the infant directly against her own chest, skin to skin, letting her body become a furnace, willing her own heat into that tiny, fragile, cooling body. "Stay with me," she whispered into the baby's ear. "You hear me? You are not done fighting. You stay with me." She looked at the boy. "What's your name?" "Timothy." "How long have you been out here, Timothy?" He thought about it, the way children think, honestly, without filters. "Since it got dark," he said quietly. "Maybe before." Hours. They had been out here for hours. "Where is your mother?" Timothy looked down at his soaked sneakers.
And in that single gesture, that small, heartbreaking downward glance, Ava understood that the answer to that question was the most painful thing in this child's world. "She said she'd be right back," he whispered. Ava closed her eyes for exactly 1 second to feel everything. Then she opened them because Timothy needed her present, not grieving. "Okay," she said. "I've got you both. You understand me? I've got you." Timothy looked up at her uniform, at the pins and the rank and the quiet authority that 18 years had carved into every line of her face. "Are you a soldier?" he asked. "I'm a SEAL," she said. He nodded slowly, as if that explained everything, as if some part of him, some deep, instinctive, childlike part, had already decided she was safe. "My mom always said don't trust strangers," he said softly, "but you look like the kind of person who saves people." And there it was. In 18 years of warfare, in missions across 6 continents, in rooms where the bravest men she had ever known had made the hardest decisions imaginable, nothing, not one single moment, had ever landed on Ava Sterling the way those 11 words did. "You look like the kind of person who saves people." She stood up, Sarah pressed to her chest, her coat wrapped tight around Timothy, who now walked pressed against her side, and she moved. 6 blocks to her apartment. She had calculated it before she'd even finished the thought. Hospital was 10 blocks east, home was 6 blocks north. The baby needed warmth before she needed anything else. Stabilize first, then evacuate. Every combat medic knew that rule. Valor walked on Timothy's other side the entire way, close enough that the boy's hand found the dog's fur without even thinking about it, and held on. Ava Sterling had not been born a warrior. She had become one, slowly, deliberately, through years of proving herself in spaces where women were told they did not belong. She had been the first female operator attached to a naval special warfare unit in her region. She had earned her Silver Star not by accident, but by running toward gunfire when every rational instinct screamed otherwise, to pull 2 wounded teammates out of an ambush that should have killed all 3 of them. She had led combat missions in environments so hostile that the weather alone was a weapon. She had done things for this country that would never appear in any newspaper, earn any parade, or be spoken of in any room that wasn't classified. And 3 years before that December night, she had stood on a flight line in the gray early morning light in her full dress uniform, her face a perfect mask of military composure, and watched a flag-draped casket come off a transport plane. Her husband, Lieutenant Commander James Sterling, Navy SEAL, Valor's original handler, the man who had taught the dog every command he knew, who had slept with that dog at his feet on deployment after deployment, who had called Ava from places he couldn't name just to say he loved her, and that Valor had done something ridiculous that made the whole team laugh. James had not come home. The folded flag had. Ava had accepted it with both hands, pressed it to her chest the way you hold something you cannot bear to put down, and she had not cried. Not in public, not in front of the honor guard, not in front of the commanding officer who told her James was one of the finest men he'd ever known. She had nodded. She had thanked them. She had walked to her car, sat in the driver's seat, and stared through the windshield at nothing for a very long time. Valor had been reassigned to her. Protocol. The dog needed a handler, and Ava needed something. Neither of them had healed, but they had learned to carry it together. The dog who waited by the door every evening at the time James used to come home. The woman who walked the long way every night because the apartment was too quiet. They had been doing that for 3 years. Until Timothy said the words that changed everything. Inside her apartment, Ava moved like a battlefield commander, executing a plan she'd written in her head during the 6-block walk. Warm blankets, gradual rewarming, never too fast, the body can't handle the shock. She called emergency services. She called a former team medic, a man named Rodriguez, who owed her more favors than either of them could count, and he was there in 11 minutes with a bag and a stethoscope and the calm hands of someone who had patched people together in far worse conditions than this. He examined Sarah for a long, silent moment that felt to Ava like standing in a minefield. Then he looked up. "She's going to be okay," he said. "You got to her in time." He paused. "Another 30 minutes out there." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Ava nodded once, controlled, professional. She excused herself, walked to the bathroom, closed the door behind her, and stood there with her back against the wall, her hands shaking, actually shaking, for the first time in longer than she could remember. Because in that moment, with the crisis passing and the adrenaline leaving her bloodstream, the memory came, the one she kept buried deepest, the last time she had held someone that cold, the last time warmth had not been enough, the last time she had whispered, "Stay with me," and the person hadn't. She pressed her fist against her lips, breathed, once, twice, 3 times. Then she straightened her back, smoothed her uniform, and walked back out. Because Timothy was sitting on her couch with Valor's head in his lap, and he was watching the door, waiting for her to return. And she was not going to let that boy watch someone walk away from him tonight. Not again. The truth about the children's mother came in pieces, the way bad news always does. She had been found 6 blocks from the park, incoherent, in the middle of a relapse that had clearly been building for weeks. Addiction, charges pending, a system already overloaded, scrambling to figure out what came next for 2 children with no immediate relatives, no emergency contacts, and a case file that was about to get very complicated very fast. The word that hit Ava hardest was separated. The foster system was full. There was a possibility, a real bureaucratic, heartless possibility, that Timothy and Sarah would be placed in different homes. Timothy didn't know the details, but children always know more than adults think they do. That night, when the apartment was quiet and Sarah was sleeping, and Valor was stationed outside the nursery door like a sentry who had not been dismissed, Timothy looked up at Ava from the couch with eyes that were far too old for his face. "They're not going to put Sarah somewhere else, are they?" he asked. "She needs me. I know how she likes to be held. I know what makes her stop crying. Nobody else knows that." Ava looked at that boy, 7 years old, soaking wet 2 hours ago, holding his baby sister in the December dark, refusing to leave her, refusing to give up, and she felt something shift inside her chest, something that had been locked and sealed and buried under 3 years of discipline and grief and forward motion. She thought about James. She thought about the folded flag. She thought about her own daughter, safe and loved and warm at her parents' house. She thought about what it meant to protect someone, not with weapons, not with training, just with presence, just with the refusal to walk away. She made a phone call that night, and another one in the morning. The meeting with her commanding officer was brief. He was a fair man and a direct one, which was why he didn't soften what he said. "If you assume emergency foster custody, Sterling, you will be removed from overseas deployment rotation, possibly permanently. You understand what that means for your career." She stood at attention in front of his desk, the same posture she'd held in briefing rooms before missions that could have killed her, the same stillness. She thought of the folded flag on her shelf at home. She thought of Sarah's blue lips in the snow. She thought of Timothy's voice. "Nobody else knows that." "Respectfully, sir," she said, her voice as steady as it had ever been in any firefight, in any crisis, in any moment that had ever asked everything of her. This is my mission now." He looked at her for a long moment. Then he nodded, and she thought, just for a second, that his eyes were not entirely dry. The night the adoption was approved, the apartment was quiet in a way it had never been quiet before. Not empty quiet, not grief quiet, something else entirely. Ava knelt beside Valor outside the nursery door. He was sitting perfectly still, ears forward, watching the crack of light beneath the door the way he had once watched perimeters on the other side of the world, standing guard, refusing to stand down. "Hey," she whispered. She put her hand on his neck, felt the warmth of him, the steadiness. "You don't have to stand watch anymore. She's safe. They're both safe." Valor didn't move, and Ava understood because she knew this dog. She knew that for 3 years he had stationed himself by the front door every evening at the time James used to come home. She knew that grief in a dog doesn't look like tears. It looks like loyalty that doesn't know where to go. "I miss him too," she whispered. Her voice broke on the last word, just slightly, just enough. "I miss him every single day." Valor turned his head and looked at her, those dark, ancient, knowing eyes. And then he leaned forward and pressed his forehead gently against hers, a gesture so deliberate, so tender, so utterly heartbreaking that Ava had to close her eyes and just breathe through it. The sound of small footsteps behind her. Timothy stood in the hallway in his pajamas, rubbing his eyes. He looked at Valor, he looked at Ava. With the quiet perception of a child who has survived things he shouldn't have had to survive, he seemed to understand that he had walked into something sacred. He sat down on the floor beside Valor without a word. The dog turned from Ava and looked at the boy. Then slowly, with the gravity of a decision that mattered, Valor rested his great gray-muzzled head on Timothy's knee.
Timothy didn't speak for a long moment. He just rested his small hand on top of Valor's head and stroked his fur gently. Then he said, barely above a whisper, "Thank you for keeping my sister safe." Ava's throat closed completely because she understood what she was watching. This dog had spent 3 years waiting for a partner who was never coming back. 3 years of a loyalty so deep and so absolute that it had nowhere left to go. And now, tonight, in this hallway, in this quiet, he had chosen. Not because he had forgotten James, but because love, real love, the kind that has been tested and broken and survived, always finds someone new to protect. Timothy looked up at her. "Does he guard us because he misses your husband?" "Yes," she said softly, "but he guards you because you're his family now." The boy nodded as if that was the most natural thing in the world. Then he leaned against Valor's side and closed his eyes. And Ava Sterling, Silver Star recipient, combat team leader, 18-year Navy SEAL, survivor of missions no one would ever know about, sat down on the floor of her hallway and put her arms around both of them, the boy and the dog, the new family assembled from grief and snow and a December night that could have ended very differently. For the first time in 3 years, she did not take the long way to avoid the silence. She sat inside it and found that it didn't hurt anymore. 2 winters passed. The apartment that had once been silent and orderly and empty was neither of those things now. There were toys on the floor and crayon drawings on the refrigerator and a science project on the kitchen table that Timothy had been explaining to anyone who would listen for 3 days. Sarah, healthy, bright, loud, and absolutely certain that the world existed specifically for her entertainment, had recently learned to say Valor's name, which came out as something closer to Vale. but which the dog responded to with the same dignity he brought to everything. Ava's daughter, home for the holidays, had stopped referring to Timothy and Sarah as the foster kids sometime around the second month. They were just her brother and sister. That was that. Valor slept by the fireplace now. He had earned it.
On a quiet evening in early December, 2 years almost to the day from the night it all began, Ava stood in her living room and looked at the shelf above the fireplace. The folded flag was still there. It would always be there. James Sterling had given everything for this country, and she would honor that every day for the rest of her life. But beside the flag now, in a simple frame, were the adoption papers. She stood in front of them for a long time. The sounds of the house moved around her. Sarah laughing at something on television. Timothy arguing gently with his older sister about the rules of a card game. Valor's slow, contented breathing by the fire. "I couldn't save you," she whispered. "Not in grief, not in guilt, just in truth. The clean, clear truth of a woman who has made peace with what she could not control and chosen to fight for what she could. But I saved them." She touched the edge of the frame lightly. Then she straightened, the way she always straightened, the posture of a warrior who has not stopped standing tall. War had shaped her. Loss had tested her. Love, messy, unexpected, arriving on a park bench in the snow without warning or permission, had rebuilt her. Not into something harder, into something more. And this time, she had not lost. Sometimes the greatest battles are not fought overseas. Sometimes they are fought 6 blocks from home, in the middle of December, with no weapons and no backup and no mission briefing, just a choice to stop, to act, to stay. The warriors who fight those battles don't always wear medals. They don't always make the history books, but they change lives just the same. They change the whole direction of a story that was heading somewhere dark and turn it with their bare hands and their breaking hearts toward light. Master Chief Ava Sterling went into that park a warrior shaped by loss. She came out of it something rarer still. A mother, a protector, a woman who understood finally that courage doesn't retire when the uniform comes off. It just finds a new mission. And Valor, that faithful, gray-muzzled, steady-hearted dog, had known it before any of them did. He always did. If this story moved you, if you felt something tonight that reminded you why we honor the people who serve and sacrifice and keep going even when the world gives them every reason to stop, then you are exactly who this channel was built for. We bring you the stories of men and women who carried more than most of us will ever know, and carried it with grace. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do it now. Not for us. Do it because these stories deserve to be heard. Do it because the warriors in them deserve to be remembered. And do it because somewhere, out there, right now, there is a veteran, a first responder, a quiet hero living an ordinary life who was anything but ordinary when it counted most. Subscribe to, leave a comment below telling us what part of this story stayed with you, and share this video with someone who needs to be reminded tonight that courage comes in many forms and love is the bravest one of all. Until next time, stay strong, stay grateful, and never forget the ones who served.